bring things over and wash at her place yet. So she was just a wonderful person. And before you were born, she'd go out in the country and get fruits and things, and she'd always share with us. She'd get watermelon and share with us. One time she went out and she brought back a lot of grapes. And on the 4th of July, before you were born, we kind of wanted to do something a little special. And we wanted to go down by the river and have a picnic. Well, everybody was going down. Everybody went to picnic down there. It's hot, in July. And she drove us down, and we found a spot down a ways on the river where we could be a little bit by ourselves. And we had our picnic down there, and then take us back.
Did she stay?
No, she just drove us down. Our things with us. She was so helpful in so many ways. She loaned me her sewing machine, and she went to San Francisco for the fair, the World Fair, and she told me I could use her sewing machine. It was a portable. I took it to our room so that I could make some things for you. And this was all before you were born, so I could make a few 90s and things. Let's see, let's get back on track here a little bit where we were.
Well, when you came back and Dad was still walking picket, then what did he do?
Well, we moved into this other little apartment, and then we were there until April. And one of the other men that worked with him at Montgomery Ward and everything, they had gone up in the mountain to the Viola lumber camp and had gotten a job. And he said they were hiring up there at this lumber mill. So your dad went up, and he got a job in the lumber mill.
Well, how did he get that job?
Now that... He stood in line with all these other great big guys.
And how much did Dad weigh?
Lumbermen were pretty good size. He weighed about 129 pounds. And he was 5'6". And this guy was standing up there and taking the fellas' names and telling them what they could do, And he looked right out over the top of your dad to the next guy. And your dad yelled up at him, "Hey, I want a job too." And he says, "Well, what can you do? You want to be water boy?" Well, your dad told him, he says, "I can do anything anybody else can do." He says, "I was raised in a lumber camp. I've worked in a sawmill all my life."
Which was a lie.
Which was stretching the truth way, way out.
Which was a lie.
Okay. The jobs were very, very scarce. So they asked him if he could off bear.
If he could what?
Sure, off bear. And now Edna would know what this is.
Yeah.
Taking the lumber from the saw, taking it off. And, oh sure, they could do that to snap. So they put him to work. And of course, after 5-10 minutes there, why, the guy that was the sawyer, he looked down and he says to him, "Just how long did you say you'd been off bearing?" And he said, "Well, I think it's been about 10 minutes and so many seconds or whatever." He says, "I thought so." Well, he says, "I'll just slow down for a little bit till you get the hang of it." And he worked the sawmill there. Well, we moved up there, and they had a little. The place was called Shingletown. It had these little houses that they built for the workers. One room, bare floors. Nothing, bare walls, nothing, just tuba floors. Bed was nailed down, a homemade bed nailed down so you couldn't move it. Table was nailed to the floor and a bench. I mean, there was nothing. There was a little stove, and there was a sink with a faucet for cold water, but you couldn't use the water.
How come?
Well, it was rusty. It was real rusty, so you had to carry your water. And anyway, we moved up there. And that was, what did we pay? $15 a month for that. There was a little store there. We was 30 miles from Reading. So we had to drive into Reading to go to do our shopping. And there was a little place there that we could go and do our washing, take our washing in.
So you went once a week? Or?
Yeah, and we had to go in on Sunday to go to church. And once in a while after payday, we felt real spry. It didn't happen very often, but we'd go in on Saturday night and we'd get a motel and spend the night. So we could go to church in the morning.
What would that cost, do you remember?
I don't remember what it cost, but I do know one thing. Up there in Shingletown, we had no electricity. We had, at night it was lamp. We went down to the motel, and of course there was electricity there. And we had no problem with you. This was just fine. But at Shingletown, in the cabin, with no electricity, when I light the lamp at night, then you would fuss. You was a fussy baby at night. And I think you were afraid of the shadows. Because evening time, you'd start to fuss always. And we never had any problem when we'd go into town. So it didn't look like the shadows were bothering me. Anyway,
how old was I then?
Oh, probably about 4 months, or 4 or 5. Anyway, we stayed there until November. You were a year old. Your dad, in the meantime, at the mill, had done everything except be Maine Sawyer. And when we told them that we were going to leave, they had offered him a job and would build us a house if he would come back in the fall, if we'd come back. They would even build us a house with electricity on.
Wow, he must have been a good worker.
They liked him. But then, who didn't? He got along well every place. But I couldn't stand that place up there. One of the men, they used to call him Tiny. And he was well over 300 pounds. And he got his belt caught in the machinery one day, and it stripped everything off from him. And the only thing that saved his life was the fact that he was a big man and braced himself, or he'd have been pulled right in. So all I could think of was that your dad wasn't very big. And I was scared to death that something terrible would happen. I always felt that when he went to work, I never knew whether he'd be coming back or not. Before we moved up there, we had bought a little car for $25.
25.
It was it'd been a little coupe that the back had been taken off, so that you could put things in, you know. And that's what we had when we went up there, so that we he could drive to the sawmill and back for work. And you were, I'd put you in your little swing, or regardless of where you were, you could hear his car coming. You know, when you'd hear his car coming, you could just tell the windows in the house, in the cabin. You'd start at one and you'd follow that, because he drove all the way around the cabin, and your little eyes would just follow that, all the sound all the way around. And oh my, how you did love your dad. He just was all smiles and everything, just jumping for joy. I did have a problem because when you were 6 months old, I lost a baby. had a miscarriage. In fact, it was pretty serious. And I was in the hospital, and Mom and Dad, and everybody came. They came with Pat, and Eugene was there too, and stayed, took care of things, took care of you.
Cabin?
All in one cabin. We had beds made on the floor, and there was even a cot outside, and I mean, you know, one cabin for all of us people was really much. But I pretty near died of that. I had last sacraments and everything, and I was in the hospital for, I guess, 2 weeks, something like this anyway. And when I came home, of course, I couldn't lift and play with you and pick you up and things, and Mom was taking care of you. And for some reason, then you just turned against me. You wouldn't let me have anything to do with you.
That was the wrong age.
It was bad. And when they stayed until you were 9 months old, and then they left, and oh, how you cried for them. And that's where the name Nan came in, because you would sit in your little swing there and you'd cry, Nana, Nana, Nana. And I always thought that maybe it was that you picked that up because Dad used to sit and rock you and everything, and he'd sing, yeah, 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 the little red fox, you can't catch me. And you'd go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And the first thing we knew, that's what you was calling Mom, Nana. And of course, all the kids called her Nan after that. Anyway, they left when you was 9 months old. So we stayed then until November. And the fact is, that year, I think we had 2 Thanksgivings. Because it seems to me that they couldn't decide on a date for Thanksgiving that year. And, or else it was the fact that it was the date of Thanksgiving that I was going by age-wise with you too, you know. And then we came out, we left there and came to Renton. And we got here for Thanksgiving. So your birthday was on the 13th. And Thanksgiving was 21st, I think, or something like that, because when you were born, because I was in the hospital 8 days. And I took you home on Thanksgiving Day. So that would have been the 21st. Well, of course, you know, Thanksgiving falls a little later now, a week later. Anyway, we were out here for Thanksgiving then. And we
Now, Dan and everybody was out here.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eugene was still was in Reading with us, and he came with us. He came back with us. We had, on your birthday, I believe it was, we bought us a car. And that was that kind of coupe that we had. And we packed the back of that just chock full.
Now, would this have been after
once.
Dad lost his job or quit the sawmill?
No, he was working at the sawmill then at the time. When he quit, we left there then.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Okay.
Yeah, but we bought the car. And the day we bought the car, Eugene bought a battery-operated radio. We didn't have any radio up there or anything all this time that we was up there because there was no electricity.
There was nothing.
But he bought this battery radio then. So for a few weeks there, while we were still up there, we had this radio, which was real neat, you know. Only I was afraid to use it when he wasn't home or anything because I thought, oh, I'll run the batteries down, you know, so we didn't use it too much. Anyway, it was an electric too, but of course we couldn't use it up there. But we packed the car full of all our stuff. We had a pretty good, you know, little coupe. We had a pretty good sized trunk. And the only thing that we had actually was the buggy for you as far as furniture. We didn't have any furniture or anything. It was just our clothing and stuff, and then we had the buggy. And Eugene came with us, and we drove back. And of course, we didn't have hardly any money. They wasn't paying anything, so we had to quit there because in the wintertime, the sawmill was outside. There was no cover or anything. There was just a small cover over a little part of it. But where everything else was out in the open, when it would start to snow, there was no work. And if you woke up in the morning and it was snowing, you didn't go to work. So you couldn't live. There was not enough money. And so that's why we quit. And we decided that we would come out here and see if we could find work here in Washington and be close to folks. So that's how come we left there, and why they had offered if we'd come back in the spring, see, and they would fix us a house and would build us a new house. But anyway, we drove all the way. We didn't stop. The first night when we got into Reading from there, we had packed up and everything. We spent the one night there at Reading in a motel. And then we drove from there out without stopping again.
So you slept in the car?
Well, they took turns driving, and every time Eugene, he was one of these klutzes. Every time he put his hand on anything, it broke. We stopped at a filling station, and he got out and he was going to check. I don't know whether it was the water or what. Anyway, he put his hand on the headlight and it fell off. I mean, there was no reason. What he did, he hit it for some reason, something or another, and it fell off. So they had to fix that. But it was a real trying trip because it was small, and there was the three of us and the baby in a coop. And there was, at that time, we didn't have that back seat lower down, it was just up, and we had fixed it up by the window so we could put you up there for a little nap, but you weren't very good about sleeping, so we were taking turns holding you, too. So it was quite a long, hard trip. But anyway, we made it, and we were real glad when we got here. So,
well, then we lived in Renton for a while?
We stayed with the folks until we could find a place, until your dad could get work. We were here a month, almost to the day when he got work. And from that month, actually, was the only time that he was ever out of work in all our married life. Because even between the jobs, he walked the picket there. He was bringing in money then. Went to the sawmill and he worked there. Came out here in that month and worked there at DuPont, Latimer and Goodwin DuPont, or chemical plant. And DuPont took it over then later. And there was no layoff, no nothing there. He just went, the company changed.
Well, what kind of work was that?
That was in chemicals, and they made insecticides. And when DuPont took over, and your dad was really doing real well there. The shipyards came in. They were paying a lot of money at work at the shipyard and stuff, but he decided he would stay there. And other people were making a lot more money than we were, but it was a good job. And they even came from Denver to check on the crystals that he was making, because they said his crystals were so much better, and they wanted to know how he's doing it. And he says, I'm not going to. That's his secret, how he made his crystals. He fell onto it by accident, and he made the best crystals around here.
Dad did?
Yes. And so then when...
now, how did he learn that?
Well, in making the crystals, from what I understand, there's a lot to do with the firing of it, see. And one day by accident, he fired them a little more than what they had been doing. It was something to do with, he had burnt them just a little. Well, they turned out to be much better. And it wasn't a great big deal, but nobody else had ever tried it. And so they sent a man out from Denver to check on his crystals.
But when he got that job, he wasn't experienced
in
working there at all.
Oh, no. Mm-mm.